Hello everybody, welcome to our webinar today. We're back. This is the third or fourth one of these that we've done. And today we are launching a new lavalier or lavalier. You're going to hear a lot of different ways of pronouncing lavalier today. This is a mid-tier lav. This is called DuraPlex, which has been specifically designed to be a durable product. This has an IP57 rating. And we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to try not to have an Elon Musk moment, but to start proceedings off, I'm going to take this lav that I've got here, and we're going to leave it to stew in this cup of water that we have. So, Pepe, if I can just check that this is working to start off with. 1, 2. Hopefully that's all coming through fine. Now, let's just dunk that straight in. So if we can have the fader down, here we go. Wonderful. And let's just check that that is marvelous. Okay, well, while we let that cook for a bit, let's come over to Dave, who's joining us. So Dave is our regional sales manager from the north of England, and then we have Stuart here with us, who is the product development manager and has been looking at DuraPlex across its development. So we'll ask Stuart a lot of technical questions in a moment, but let's come to Dave first. So let's come to what a lavalier is to start off with. What's the history of it? Where has it come from?
Okay, so as you said, there's a few ways to pronounce it: lavalier, lavalier. Some people use the word tie clip, or collar mic, or personal mic, or button mic. There's all kinds of words. But lavalier tends to be shortened to lav, and the word lavalier, it's French. It comes from a French word which describes a piece of jewelry that's worn around the neck like a pendant. And the first sort of application of the word lavalier for a microphone was in the 1930s. There were a few experiments and trials to try and make something that could be worn around the neck that would allow the presenter, it was a presenter thing at the time, to have hands-free and not have a mic on a stand that would be in sight lines and so on and so forth. And it was a bit limited because of the size of the capsules that were available at that point in time. And then as things move forward, we come into the sort of into the 40s and 50s, and telephone operators had a lavalier mic, which was kind of a contraption that was worn around the neck with a mouthpiece, and that allowed them to do the call patching and hands-free. And then as we fast forward through time, capsules become smaller to the point where they're small enough and light enough to be clipped directly to clothing. So it's still really a presenter's product at this time. It's not crossed over into performance yet. And of course, we don't have wireless systems yet, so you know the presenter is on the end of a cable, so it's something that you're plugged into when you sit down to present your program or whatever. But then coming into the late 60s and 70s, as wireless systems become available, we get the combination of the lav mic and a wireless body pack, which then lends itself to the potential for that to be used in a performance application and not just a presentation application. And then the further development of that is to take a lav and put it on the end of a boom with a wire frame and use it as a headset mic. And the first notable application of that was the Kate Bush tour in 1979, where the engineers on that show fabricated a frame from a coat hanger wire, I believe, and they put a small, for the time, a small lav capsule on the end, and she used that for that tour. And then headset mics kind of became a thing in the 70s and the 80s with Kate Bush, and then Michael Jackson, Madonna, Sammy Hagar with Van Halen, all using headset mics. So that was kind of a thing. But coming back to using it as a body-worn microphone, as I said, the technology has allowed the capsules to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so now it's crossed over into use on instruments with wireless systems, and also use in theatre and stage performance applications.
Now, we're actually using lavs today, obviously.
Yes.
We are, in fact, using DuraPlex lavs with Axia Digital Systems. So what are some of the features that lavs in the modern world, what do they have to have? What features make them useful for us?
So there's a couple of considerations for presenting. I mean, you want intelligibility. In the corporate world, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for audio quality and intelligibility, if I can say it. When we move across into stage performance, we're looking at audio quality, but we're looking at maybe a wider dynamic range and possibly higher sound pressure levels. So we're looking at that, but we're also looking at the size of the capsule. So in theatre, for example, and in broadcasting to an extent, it's important to be able to hide the microphone, so it's not visible to the audience. So the size of the capsule is an important consideration. And then the third thing is the durability, because in performance situations, particularly theatre applications where the microphone might be mounted against the skin, it's often mounted on the forehead, which has the advantage of meaning we don't get that Doppler effect if it was mounted here as the head moves around, like a fire engine going past or whatever. It maintains that same distance from the mouth. But of course, we've now got stage makeup and sweat and all of that kind of stuff, which can clog up and kill the capsule. And at the same time, you've got the head movement, which is constantly stressing the cable. So eventually, cables do fail because they're constantly being stressed and stretched and bent and so on and so forth. So it's a really hostile environment. So the durability of the product is also a fairly significant consideration. And in some cases, people will weigh up maybe sacrificing a bit of audio quality to get something that's more durable or something that's smaller. Depending on the application, they'll prioritize one of those three factors.
Well, DuraPlex is something that has tried to not compromise and to give us the durability, and we'll come on to more details with that with Stuart in a moment. But before we get there, let's talk about where this sits in our range in terms of pricing and in the general range as well. So I think we've got a slide we can view now of the pricing of DuraPlex in pounds sterling and in euros. So how does this compare to our range, Dave, and general stuff in the marketplace?
So if we start kind of outside of the Shure range, you start with sort of sub £50 generic lavs that are sold by kind of electronics suppliers, component suppliers, which in some cases for a very low budget production are used almost as like a consumable, a disposable item. Shure don't make a product at that level because it's not very environmentally friendly. And in most cases, the audio quality of those products is barely acceptable. Moving up from that, we come into the kind of pro presenter level lavs for corporate presentation. Typically, they can be a little bit bigger because that's acceptable in the corporate world. Often they're tailored for speech, but then generally not robust enough still for stage performance applications. Then we kind of had something of a gap between that level of lav mic and the premium level. So our Twimplex premium lav has the ultimate in audio quality, but also is designed to be durable enough for theatre and stage performance. So it's got the Plex cable, which Stuart's going to talk about. The big advantage of the Twimplex capsule is it's a dual diaphragm capsule. So we've got two plates in there. So actually, we've got a much bigger surface area than any other 5mm lav on the market, and it sounds like a much bigger capsule than it actually is physically. So it has great audio performance. But there was a gap between the presenter level lav and that premium level lav, which is where DuraPlex now sits. And so what we've done is we've taken the Plex cable and we've paired it with a slightly lower cost cartridge, microphone capsule, to produce DuraPlex. But actually, we've at the same time produced a product which is potentially even more durable than anything else that's currently on the market. From a price point of view, the DL4 is at £245 on the Limo connector and £230 on the MTQG, and sort of €268, €252 similarly. And then the headset version is at £330 on the Limo, £315 on the TQG, €361, €344 as the comparison there. So it's about £100 less than the Twimplex product.
Than its big cousin.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, and DuraPlex obviously comes with some accessories. Accessories and lavalier mics are very important, and I think we've got a slide that we can look at for accessories. Could you just talk us through what comes in the box?
So with the DuraPlex, we get a presence cap, which I think we're all wearing today, which gives us a presence peak. I'll let Stuart elaborate on that a little bit more. But we also get a couple of windshields, a clip-on windshield and a push-on windshield. We get the sticky mount. We get the tie clip or the clip, and we get an adapter that allows the connector to be screwed to the body pack so that it's secured to the body pack and won't easily come adrift.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thanks for that, Dave. Before we come to our lav that is soaking nicely in our cup, I just wanted to take a moment to point out to anybody that's on the call, you can ask questions. There should be a questions tab, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of the session. So make sure that you get some in. But let's come to this now and see how it's got on while Dave has been running us through the lab. So I just want to check it's still working, Pepe. If we can have that up, I'll just tap the glass quickly. Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to remove it now. Here we go. Now it comes. Now that is sopping wet. Let's just make sure that's down on the desk, Pep. The water out of the element, and 1, 2. I can see signal coming in on my Axiom Digital. Let's just see if it's coming through. 1, 2. Check, check. Wonderful. So that appears to have survived its little dunk in the water. And to understand why that is, let's come to you now, Stuart. So where did DuraPlex come from? Why did we decide we wanted to build a lav like this?
So we've already mentioned the TwinPlex range that we launched last year around April time at the NAB show. And the TwinPlex itself, what is a very durable lav and headset platform. It has the Plex cable, and I'll talk about some of those benefits soon. But even the capsule itself, it has a very hydrophobic element in there. It's designed for those theatre environments where it's going to encounter makeup and sweat. But we knew we wanted something that was both more resilient, more kind of durable in more extreme environments, and also sat at a lower price point from TwinPlex, because the actual dual diaphragm element in TwinPlex, it required a lot of investment in terms of manufacturing capability. Making something that has 2 condenser elements in a 5mm capsule housing is an expensive and complicated process. So to create a 5mm element and also have it both consistent in performance and at a lower price point, we actually turned to a MEMS condenser-based element. And what we found with the MEMS element is that it gave us some performance advantages in those extreme conditions. So it was very consistent in environments with high humidity, high temperatures, as well as cold weather performance. So that allowed us to look at things like achieving the IP57 rating that was really important for this platform. And then at the same time, we were able to take that and pair it with the TwinPlex cable to make an even more durable product. And just lastly, to touch on the manufacturing point of view, another thing we found when switching to that MEMS condenser element was that we had not only consistent performance in those extreme environments, but we also had very consistent performance in terms of the actual sound signature, the frequency response, and consistency and reliability from unit to unit. So when you're mass producing something on the scale like this, it's important that customers can trust that when I'm buying 15, 20 plus labs, I know that my sound quality is going to be consistent between all of those units. And that was another advantage of that we found with that MEMS condenser.
I want to dive into those 2 elements in a bit more detail, starting off with the capsule, because this is not something that we've produced before. This is very new to the marketplace, this concept of a MEMS capsule. So could you just speak to how it's different from something like a TwinPlex capsule or other lavaliers that you might have used in the past?
So it's kind of different, and it's not. In terms, the MEMS simply stands for micro electromechanical systems. But in terms of the actual how it's converting acoustic energy into an electrical signal, it's very similar in principle to an electric condenser microphone that TwinPlex is. The difference is the actual diaphragm element it's measuring capacitance, it's converting that, or changes in capacitance with a fluctuating diaphragm. It's converting that into an electrical voltage, but at that point, the signal is being driven into a chip, and the diaphragm itself is extremely small, mounted on a circuit board itself. So you're talking about elements that are 2 to 3 millimeters in size, compared to a traditional electric condenser that might be maybe a few mils larger, driving a FET impedance converter to then impedance match into a body pack or an XLR preamp. But from a kind of use point of view and a customer's point of view, it's very simple to think of this as it's a condenser microphone. That's how it's functioning. It's looking at fluctuations in the diaphragm, and then it's converting that into a change in capacitance, which leads to a change in voltage. So,
big advantage with that technology is that we get that IP57 rating. Could you break down what that is in a bit more detail as well?
Well, the IP57 rating is a measure of how a kind of component or a device copes with ingress protection. That's what the IP stands for. So it's how well it fares in both dusty environments and liquid environments. The first number, the 5, relates to solid ingress, so dust. 5 means that there is an element of dust ingress, but it's not enough to actually impede the operation of the microphone element itself. And then the 7 is relating to liquid ingress. So as we demonstrated, what the 7 means from a customer perspective is this microphone element could be submerged in up to 1 meter of water for a duration of 30 minutes. Now, that's not to say it wouldn't survive beyond 30 minutes, and at that point, your microphone's going to die. It just means that to achieve this rating, that is the testing criteria. It has to be removed after 30 minutes and still function. And it's kind of a rating that is recognized both in the microphone industry and outside of that. It's been common in loudspeakers for a number of years. PA systems, emergency evacuation systems, all are familiar with this concept of an IP rating as a measure of how durable and how good a product is at withstanding the elements.
Let's come to the cable then, because we've seen this cable before, as we've mentioned TwinPlex. And I think that to kind of make this live in a little bit more detail, we have a slide that shows what's actually going on in this cable. So could you talk us through this?
Yeah, so we've spoken, when we launched TwinPlex a year ago, we spoke a lot about the actual cable because it formed a big part of the research. We found when developing TwinPlex that a common complaint with lav microphones is that once you break that shield, you lose the ground continuity and it exposes your microphone to RF interference, GSM, it affects the GSM immunity. So with TwinPlex, we actually spent about 5 years researching different types of cable, putting them through stress tests, testing how many flexes does it take to break the cable, things like memory effect, if you wrap it around a body pack. Once you lay it out again, will it lie flat? Will it develop kinks? And also, once that cable does break or the shield breaks, how can you overcome that? Like, how can you get more life out of that cable? Because there was a time where, as Dave mentioned, they were treated a little bit like consumables because once that shield broke, you had no way of tracing where in a 5-foot lav cable that break was and then snipping and repairing it. So you would often have to simply purchase a new one. What the TwinPlex cable offered us, or I should say the Plex cable, now that it's been adopted into the DuraPlex product family, is it gave us a redundant ground for the first part. So we have the item D here is the copper stranded shield. Mm-hmm. That's the main shield that we use for the RF immunity and shielding. But we also have this dual redundant ground. So there's these tinsels wrapped with strengthening fibers that if you get a break in that primary shield, the electrical signal can still travel along this dual redundant ground and you maintain your RF immunity and your shield continuity. So it means that in order for that cable to fail, you would have to break both the primary and secondary grounds in the exact same point to break your shield continuity. And another kind of big part of the research was the actual outer jacket of the cable. So I've mentioned things like the memory effect. We wanted to ensure that if it gets wrapped up, you can still lie it flat for running through costumes, any sort of application, you would use a lav mic. But it had to withstand your theatre makeups, your theatre paints, because quite often in a production, you're going to be colour matching these to any makeup that the character may be wearing. And at the same time, you don't want to throw these away after every production. So it needed to be able to handle your most common or theatre makeups and paints. And at the same time, it had to be able to handle things like isopropyl alcohol wipes so that you could clean and sterilize those units after a production is finished. So the cable itself, like I said, we spent about 5 years researching it and we ended up sourcing it from the medical industry because much like in the same way we need very clean, we wanted the ability to use those alcohol wipes. They require an environment that is very sterile, and it's important that those cables can withstand the sort of cleaning that takes place in a medical environment. And likewise, the dual redundant ground, you can't have medical equipment with dodgy intermittent connections. So now that we have that cable technology, we wanted to take what we had from Twinplex and bring it down to the DuraPlex range, taking the microphone element that in itself is very resilient and adding that added layer of resilience in the Plex cable as well, just to really kind of hammer the message home that this is a very durable and strong microphone.
So just to recap then, this cable is very durable. You can paint it, you can clean it with isopropyl alcohol. What colours does this come in?
So the lab versions comes in tan, cocoa, black and white, and all of those can be painted, and then the headsets come in black, cocoa and tan.
Okay. And the big question that I think a lot of people are going to have is to get this durability with the IP57 capsule and the cable durability that we have, is there going to be any compromise in the audio from this capsule at all?
No. So in achieving the IP57, the main priority as well is ensuring that we launch a very good sounding microphone. Like, at the end of the day, we're a microphone company, so sound quality comes first. And you should be able to see, if we bring up the slide with the frequency response, we spent a lot of time actually working, again, testing different MEMS condenser elements to ensure that we could get this nice flat frequency response. At the moment, we're all using the presence caps, so the MEMS labs will ship with a single cap there. So without the cap, you can see that the frequency response, there's this high-end lift that kind of goes around the 5 to 20K mark. But with the presence cap, you get this boost and roll off towards the top end that really helps with presentation applications, or if you're hiding this under a costume or putting it in a kind of a button location, just to get some of that presence back in a performance. At the same time, this is a performance microphone, so it needs to be able to cope with the high SPLs that you would get from a kind of trained theatrical singer. Some of those people can easily exceed 100 dB SPL if you're close miking them with an Omni Lav. So again, this performance, we worked and tested a lot of elements to ensure that we could actually hit a very acceptable max SPL level before any sort of clipping or distortion with this element. And then lastly, we wanted something that, while we can still get that nice high SPL, we wanted a low self-noise so that you have a very good dynamic range for those quiet passages. It's not a noisy capsule at the quiet segments in order to cope with those higher signal levels. Okay,
well, I want to come on in a moment to a bit more detail in the difference between Twinplex and DuraPlex and why you might choose one over the other. Just before we do, we are hurtling towards question time. So if you have got some questions, do please get them in, and there'll be plenty of time to ask them later. But let's look at DuraPlex and Twinplex, and I think there's a slide we can see that kind of compares a few details between the two. And the question that I want to ask to both of you really is when you might choose Twinplex over DuraPlex, when you might choose DuraPlex over Twinplex. And Dave, if we can come to you first for your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, as you can see from the spec, in the game of top trumps, Twinplex, has a higher level of specification, and the point in time when I would choose Twinplex is when I need that ultimate in sound quality, that ultimate in audio performance, when I want something that's going to sound bigger than a lav, that big full sound that Twinplex has, and it's easily durable from theater applications and that kind of stuff. If we were then coming, or on a theater show where there was a lot of liquid being thrown around, or that kind of thing, or if we're working on a film location or in a sports application where we might be working outside in the elements and that kind of thing, then I might decide that I can sacrifice a little bit of audio quality and come to the DuraPlex level of lav to just get that extra level of durability, but whilst maintaining enough audio quality to satisfy the demands of the production.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add to that, Stuart?
Just to kind of repeat and echo what's already been said, like if you look at the actual frequency response, it was very flat through all the important ranges. So when you're comparing audio quality of Twinplex and DuraPlex, like Twinplex extends a little bit lower, it's a little bit flatter through the upper range, but DuraPlex is still a very good quality sounding microphone. Twinplex offers some greater flexibility in terms of connector types. So there's a no connector option. So if you wanted to re-terminate on any sort of other connectors like 4-pin, Hiroshi, however you say it, Electrosonics with their TA5F connectors. Twimplex gives you those options, whereas DuraPlex is really a LEMO 3-pin or TA4F connection only. And Twimplex has that, but we also do a 1.1mm cable with Twimplex. So if you wanted something for a theatre that was even thinner than the standard 1.6, you have those options in terms of cable and accessories with the Twimplex range. And yeah, like Dave said, top trumps, it's just a little bit quieter. There's a little bit more max SPL with it, but DuraPlex is definitely a contender.
Okay, well, thanks very much, gentlemen. Let's come to some questions now, and we have had a few come in. So the first one that I'd like to ask is to Stuart, actually, to come back to you quickly. What connector types are available for DuraPlex?
So we have the LEMO 3-pin and the TA4F, and part of that is Shure historically has always had TA4 connections on all of our body packs, but we've started to introduce more LEMO 3-pin options, and we wanted to have, likewise with our wired offerings, we wanted to increase the choice for those customers that wanted to use LEMO 3-pins.
Dave, one for you. Could this ever be seen as a wired lavalier? Could you wire this into a mixing console rather than a wireless
I mean,
system?
you can use it with, Stuart will remind me the name of the preamp.
Oh, the RPM 400s.
Good one, RPM 400. We can use it with that preamp and then use an XLR cable and then run that cable to the console, so yes.
Okay, we've had one come in here that I'm going to open up to both of you. Have we got any plans or ideas to incorporate this amazing waterproof lav into an aerobics headset? And the example they've given is the SM31FH. So I guess the big thing with that is that that's a cardioid capsule in that aerobics headset, isn't it?
Yeah, and the aerobics headset, the model you've mentioned, the FH, it does feature that hydrophobic coating that we've also seen adopted in the Twimplex range. So there's no plans at the moment to take this particular element and build it into that particular aerobics headset, but it's a good suggestion, so we'll definitely feed it on.
But if you wanted to have something of a lower profile, it's quite a big, bulky headset, isn't it? I guess this is going to be the better option between DuraPlex and Twimplex because of the IP57 rating.
Yeah. Again, what the SM31FH offers in terms of a fitness headset is it's got a nice kind of sturdy frame. Like you said, it's directional, and a lot of the times in these aerobics classes, it's not just a person presenting or teaching the class. There's other elements, there's background music, so the directionality of that mic helps minimize some of that additional noise and elements coming in. DuraPlex is an omnidirectional pattern, as is Twimplex, so I think perhaps sometimes in those environments you may find you would struggle with feedback using an omnidirectional capsule in order to get the volume you needed to teach those sorts of classes while still having the background music to get people doing reps.
Oh, there we go. So for fitness applications, it's still the FH headset in particular that we would recommend for that. Dave, one for you. Will we be able to buy spare accessories for DuraPlex?
Yes.
Amazing.
No need to elaborate, yes.
Yeah, you will be able to buy accessories for it.
Fantastic. And one that I think to finish up is going to be for you, Stuart. Will DuraPlex be available as part of any wireless systems as like a bundle kind of situation?
Yeah, so if you've seen our previous webinar that we did on the SLXD system that we launched a few months ago now, along with the DuraPlex launch, that we also announced a bundle for the SLXD digital system. So that comes with SLXD single receiver, a body pack, and one of the DL4 lavs in black.
Amazing. That wraps up my questions then, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here today. And thanks everyone for joining. We hope that this was useful. We'll be back for something else very soon. I'm sure we're talking about what to do next. But until then, it's goodbye from all of us. And we hope to see you on the next one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.